Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the James City County Planning Commission. It is 6 p.m. on October 5th, 2022. Mr. Holt, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers. Here. Mr. Rogers represents the Berkeley District. Ms. Knoll.
Present.
Ms. Knoll represents the Stonehouse District. Mr. Rose, who represents the Roberts District, could not be with us this evening. Mr. Polster.
Here.
Mr. Polster represents the Jamestown District and is Vice Chair to the Commission. Mr. Haldeman.
Here.
Mr. Haldeman is an at-large member. Mr. Krupp, who represents the Powhatan District, could also not be with us this evening. Mr. O'Connor.
Here.
Mr. O'Connor is an at-large member and is Chair of the Planning Commission. I'm Paul Holt, Director of Community Development and Planning for the county. Sitting to my left is Ms. Liz Parman, our Deputy County Attorney. It's my pleasure to be Secretary to the Commission, and Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Thank you.
Just one quick housekeeping note tonight. The third public hearing, which is the solar project for Richmond Road, the applicant has asked for deferral. We've opened that public hearing and we'll look to continue it to November. So if there's anybody here that wishes to speak on that application, feel free to speak during the public hearing, but know that the presentation and the applicant will be here and the discussion will be in November. So we can go from there. So at this point, I'd like to open up public comment. This is the part of the agenda reserved for just general comments directed towards the Planning Commission that are not germane to any of our public hearings this evening. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to reports of the commission. We had no DRC or policy committee meetings last month, so we can bypass any reports and move on to the consent agenda, which is the minutes of the September 7th, 2022 regular meeting. So,
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda.
we have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our first public hearing this evening, SUP-22-0007, Branscome Resource Recovery and Aggregate Storage. Ms. Costello, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Mr. J. Lipscomb has applied on behalf of Branscome Incorporated for a special use permit for a resource recovery and aggregate storage facility. The parcel is located at 750 Blowflats Road, zoned M2 General Industrial, and is designated as General Industry on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map. There is an active borrow pit on the property that is subject to conditions of a previously approved SUP. Separate from the borrow pit use, concrete and other materials are also being brought to the site, crushed, and then utilized at the Branscome Asphalt Plant on Merrimack Trail, or sold on-site to other contractors. A resource recovery and aggregate storage facility is a specially permitted use in the M2 zoning district. The applicant has requested an SUP to be able to operate this portion of the business in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Access to the site is provided by a private road that begins at the end of Blowflats Road. Blowflats Road is a narrow substandard road. Furthermore, the intersection of Blowflats Road and Pocahontas Trail is also substandard. As such, staff finds that the roadway may not be suitable for the heavy construction traffic that is associated with a resource recovery and aggregate storage facility. Staff finds that the proposal is compatible with surrounding zoning and development and is generally consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. However, this proposal will add more truck traffic to a local road that is inadequate to manage the current truck traffic. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend denial to the Board of Supervisors. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval of this case, staff has included proposed conditions to mitigate the potential impacts that would result from this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also available. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Haldeman?
Hi, thank you. The applicant is already crushing asphalt and concrete on this site, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so What extra is being proposed here? What
We
extra?
would like to expand this use.
Okay, doing the
to-
same thing, just in larger size, larger quantities, is that it, or?
Yes, it's to a larger area on the property.
Gotcha, okay. Blowflats Road is a public road, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's the road that goes off of it that's the private road.
Yes.
And so to try to upgrade the road is not the responsibility of the applicants or the property owners along Blowflats. I guess that would be a state responsibility.
For Blue Flats Road, it's a state-maintained road.
Okay. Oh, VDOT had some recommendations in your report.
Yes.
Should they not be made conditions?
The only recommendation that we could condition was the commercial entrance at the private road and Below Flats Road, which would be a requirement of the site plan. The other recommendations are all off-site recommendations, which we could not condition.
Is VDOT planning to act on any of those, do you know, or, I know that's not your job, but,
I don't believe so. They're requesting the applicant do that.
thank you.
Just for clarification, in your truck study, you indicated that there's, at least in the 22 period, that there were 300 vehicles daily going back and forth. Do you expect to see any increase in that number?
Our assumption is if the business is expanded, that there would be increased traffic, but I can defer that to the applicant as to whether there would be more truck traffic.
But they have been running 300 trucks up and down that road for a while.
On a peak day, yes.
Okay. So the second question that I think I asked, I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that. I asked the question of staff about what the VDOT responsibilities were for the public road and whether the staff had had any discussions, and the answer was yes. But in talking with the VDOT folks, is this road falls way below the other county priorities. And so I almost feel like the applicant is caught in a catch-22 with this. So what is the condition if we do approve this that you're proposing?
We're not proposing any conditions with the road.
Okay, what conditions are you providing that would have anything to do with the road? Is it just the private entrance?
It's just that's the only condition we can is the commercial entrance.
All right. Thank you very much.
I had one, I'm sorry,
That's okay.
I lost this before. We have 11 residences along the road in an M2 district.
Yes.
How did that, they got there before the zoning? Is that what it was, or how did?
The majority of them were built in the 40s and 50s. Some of them we do not have records for. They were built before the zoning ordinance, the first zoning ordinance in 1969. But no new residences would be able to be built at this point because it's not permitted.
Right, so
They're legally non-conforming.
and they were built certainly legally, and they, I guess they assumed it was going to be a residential area, or at the time they built them, and they got a zoning to around them, is that?
I'm thinking back in 1969, they probably meant for that area to be an industrial district at some point. There just happened to be residences along the road.
Ms. Costello, have you had any complaints from any of those people that live along the road? Their houses are very far back from the road. I'm just wondering, are any of them complaining about all these trucks going up and down the road, or no?
We have not received any complaints, no.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up the public hearing, and the speaker card I have is Mr. Lipscomb.
My name is Julian H. Lipscomb, Jr. I'm the environmental manager with Branscome Incorporated, and I've been with them for going on 27 years now. So I've been before this body and the Board of Supervisors a number of times over the years, dealing with our Blowflats Road property from a mining perspective. Let me open up with, this property has been in a part of our operation since the 70s. It was when we started mining the property. In 2005, we started, we were reclaiming areas of the pit in the middle of our 281 acres, where we have a nice level area where we finished reclaiming, brought it back up to grade, and we started bringing demolition concrete on the site from road projects and what have you. And what we do with that is that we would crush the material and then we'd sell it to other contractors. Demolition concrete is about $6 a ton cheaper than new stone. So it's quite a perk to us and to the contractors that buy it. And going forward in 2010, we were, well, let me say, in 2010, we used to store the asphalt, the RAP, reclaimed asphalt pavement, at our Lee Hall plant, because that's an integral product in the manufacture of our asphalt. We can put 30% of RAP back in the mix, and that cuts out 30% of new liquid stone sand. So and this is an important aspect of our business. Unfortunately, at the Merrimack Trail property, where it's a limited parcel, we were storing this material under the VEPCO's transmission lines. The pile got too high from a safety standpoint. VEPCO wrote us a letter and directed us to remove the material. We have 281 acres just on the other side of Route 60, so that was the logical place to move this operation. And that's what we did. And we've been operating it there since 2010 with asphalt. And one of the conditions of our mining permit is that I have to do an annual report to the staff every year on how much land is disturbed. So I started in 2011 setting up field trips every December with the county staff, where I'd call the environmental division and usually meet them, environmental and planning. And we'd drive around all the sites. I'd point out the areas I'm claiming that are not vegetated as per county definition. And that's what we reflect on the map. And I do that just so I hire the man to draw the map. We only have to draw it once. Well, these piles have been there since 2011. We've driven around them. We've talked about them, and I explained what they were. No issue was ever brought up about them. In 2010, we applied for a tent permit on that property. And the purpose of that tent was to store mineral filler, which is an aggregate that we put in special mixes in the asphalt there on Merrimack Trail. Staff approved that, so I almost feel de facto that they've already approved us as being an aggregate facility by approving the tent permit. It too is located in the middle of the resource recovery area is what we're calling it. 2017, we put in a permit for a scale where we now ticket every load that goes out of there by the ton. And staff approved that, building permits, what have you, and we've erected it. And I think it was 2018, we came back before the Board of Supervisors, or you all and the Board of Supervisors, to renew our mine permit. And that went through all parties with no problem. And funny, and VDOT didn't raise a concern about the road then. Activity's been ongoing for a number of years. So this brings us up to 2021, where we have our field trip, and I have the environmental division and I have the zoning administrator with us this time. And we drove around the pile, and I asked the question. So I guess I told on myself. I said, can I deduct this area where we're storing aggregates and crushing aggregates from the disturbed area on my maps? Well, the light came on with the zoning folks. And she went back and looked into it and then called me and told me, you're going to have a special use permit. We consider it resource recovery. Okay. I thought, well, no big deal. We've been doing this operation for 17 years. Well, I was dumbfounded when I found out that staff is recommending denial. I do feel like we're in a catch-22 because we've been ongoing. We haven't had any complaints from any neighbors. And the staff was recommending this denial based on the traffic count. The traffic count I gave her is a historic traffic count. Those vehicles have already traveled that road. It's a done deal. It was used by the traffic, both us and many of the residents and other businesses in the Commerce Park. And there were no accidents, no injuries, no complaints. So my concern is that, or my belief is that staff's identifying a problem that really doesn't exist because the traffic has functioned there for 17 years, no complaints. The last complaints I had maybe 6 or 8 years ago were speeding. And I got our radar gun, sat out there for an afternoon and shot the trucks and stopped the ones that were going too fast. And we warned them that if they don't comply, they're banished. I haven't had any complaints since. We have a caretaker. Our mine foreman lives on site. He's a part of the Blow Flats community. And I asked him if he's heard any complaints from any of the neighbors. And he knows them because he tells me so-and-so's husband died. You know, he's interconnected with the folks. He hasn't received anything. Now, I will tell you that our mine is playing out. The borrowed material is about gone. Our mine foreman estimates there's maybe 3,000 tons left. And in those numbers that I gave staff, 70% of the truck traffic was for the borrow pit, 30% resource recovery. And so when this 3,000 tons plays out, we're essentially going to be in reclamation mode. We won't be hauling material out. We'll be accepting dirt coming in from jobs. If they're coming in from our job, we usually do these trucks as dead, and we won't send them out deadhead. If they come and dump dirt for us, we'll put other material on it and get it delivered to our other project sites. So, and the other users on the road, you've got Columbia Gas, you got the 11 residences and a little mobile home park. The Christmas Mouse has a warehouse back there. Seaman Construction, Commercial Ready Mix runs a concrete plant out of there. Landscaping Company, self-storage. Henry Branscome Jr. has his own construction company at the end of Blue Flats Road. And there are a number of tractor trailers on the Commerce Park. So the comments that VDOT made directed to our project would need to be shared by everybody on Blue Flats Road and in that commercial park. So that is the problem. So in reality, I'm actually quite proud of our drivers and the residents and the members of the Commerce Park that they were resourceful and were able to work and navigate and ingress and egress out of Blow Flats Road without having any accidents or any injuries. So the real concern that I see for the county is with VDOT. We have deficient infrastructure going to the commercial, the Green Mountain Industrial Park and the Commerce Park and property that's been zoned M2 industrial by the county. You know, we need to work that direction and maybe elevate that road up to the 6-year plan or what have you. So that's where we need to send our priorities. I will say too that as Terry said, we do access the property at the end of Blow Flats Road by an easement that had to be given to us by Walmart to get to our property. This was a prescriptive easement that has gone back to the late 1800s. And we were sued by Greenmount when the Walmarts were being built to try to get us kicked off that easement. But the court ruled in our favor and we prevailed. So as a side note, I've always wanted to get our trucks off Blow Flats Road because there used to be children on there too, and that's always worried me. Then the neighborhood is aged up. There are no more children. School buses don't come. But I still want to get our trucks off that road so that we can access the main highway by the traffic light at Greenmount. Greenmount Road is about 1,400 feet from our property line now. Every time I've come before the county, for you all, the board of supervisors, I've always put in a plug, let's try to extend Greenmount Road to our property, because that's 281 acres of valuable industrially zoned property that's waterfront. And so the county knows that it's valuable property. And we also have the adjacent property owned by Waste Management, and we have the mine permit for that property. But we only mine for them for clay for their landfill. But that's another couple of 100 acres of industrial property that could be used. So I have spoken, as a side note, to Walmart, the folks at the distribution center, trying to get access across their back property to Greenmount Road. Their bureaucracy is as bad as the federal government's in Arkansas. So, you know, this may come to fruition. My hope is that it comes before I retire in 2 years, but it's something I'm pushing. And just as soon as we get the go-ahead, our trucks will not be on Blow Flats Road. We're going to go out at Safeway at the traffic light. So in closing, I just request that you approve us so that we can continue our operation at Blue Flats Road. We're not making it any bigger. It's just we have so much land there, we have spread out the piles. Because we'll have a mountain of wrap, a mountain of millings, and a mountain of crushed concrete and unprocessed concrete. So we've been a good citizen there for 17 years, or doing this for 17 years, and we want to keep providing, because we are a convenience for the contractor and for the end users of this product. Because if any of you are tearing up your driveway, we'll take it for free. We don't charge to dump concrete or asphalt. So just because we can crush it and put it back into commerce. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Alderman?
How many more trucks would be on the road if this is approved? A daily average?
I predict that we're going to drop because the mining is going to essentially cease. So I'm going to say we're probably going to drop 25, 30%.
You mentioned earlier that the $6 a ton cheaper that your product is than fresh concrete.
No, then virgin stone.
Virgin stone, excuse
Right.
me. It's good for the company and good for the customer. Isn't it also good for the environment to take up used asphalt and concrete and crush it and reuse it? Isn't that
It is very environmentally conscious thing to do, because when we're reprocessing this material, it's not going to the landfill. Back in the early days when recycling got to be big with DEQ, the county used to require us to give tonnage reports on how much steel we recycle, how much concrete, how much asphalt, because that product wasn't going to the landfill. DEQ has ceased taking that information anymore, because the counties were enjoying the benefit of showing the reduction in waste. But it is quite valuable to the environment.
I wanted to ask whether or not the aggregate storage will probably continue there for some time after the mining piece folds?
After
The mining piece starts to
oh,
reduce?
yes, sir. I would say that's where we're probably going to shift. It's going to take years for us to reclaim what we've mined. We're doing that now as we mine. But the aggregate facility would remain, yes, sir.
And I thought I heard you say that the aggregate storage was about 30% of the trips in and out of Blow Flats?
Yes, sir, for us.
and then the rest is in the mining piece.
Correct. And during that spell when I gave those numbers, we were sending this borrow material out to Newport News that were building the bridge approaches there on the new Denby bridges. So this was a big job that we had on an order for. That's what took most of our material. James City Soil is holding up Newport News bridges.
So if you're doing 500 trips peak and 30% of your trips are for the aggregate, you're going to be down 100 to 150.
I'd say that would probably be fairly reasonable.
That's quite a reduction.
I think it will be once the mining is played out.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lipscomb? How long?
Thank you.
No, I have actually one, Mr. Lipscomb. How long do you think, you said you have 3,000 tons of borrow left. So when do you think you would cease mining activities?
It's based on demand, so I would say maybe in the next year and a half to 2 years.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Lipscomb.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak on this hearing? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I drove out there yesterday, and the road looks just like the road coming in here. I was out there for a good half hour. I didn't see anyone. I didn't see any trucks. I thought I was in no man's land. I actually went down the Walmart private drive, and then I didn't know if I was going to get arrested, so I turned around and came back. But I felt perfectly safe on the road. I don't see any issues, and they've been doing this for 17 years, and so the road use will be reduced when they stop mining. It's not going to be increased by any of the numbers that we have now. So I think it's, I'm going to vote for it.
Other comments?
I also took my very first drive down Blow Flats Road late last week. I'd never been there before. I agree with staff's and VDOT's assessment. It's not a great road. And there are going to be more businesses. There are, all along opposite the residential area, are undeveloped industrial parcels that are going to come online at some point, hopefully. We hope they will. It would be good for the county if they do. That's my one hesitation. I really would like to support this. It's a good business. It's been an important part of James City County for a long time, and it's what they're doing is good for the environment, I think, or as good as construction can be. And my only concern again was what's the capacity of that road to handle additional development, including one more application tonight that's going to add more trucks to the very beginning of Blow Flats Road. So that's my one reservation, but I think I'm going to support this. I think it's important that this go forward.
Mr. Bolster?
I also feel like the applicant that they got caught in a catch-22, especially since it's a VDOT road that is up to them to maintain. And in my query of the staff, they have had conversations with VDOT. The issue is a question of priorities. I mean, county priorities in terms of the things that they want done. I would agree that if this is to be developed more in the future, Jack's point on that, then the county would be smart to look at how this would, in fact, go across that small piece of easement by the Walmart into the Greenmount Road, than to be able to directly go into the Skiffs Creek. And for the benefit of that yet undeveloped land back in there that could be part of an industrial complex, it seemed to me that that would be a good business decision on the part of the county to at least examine that connection, for the very same reasons where the county put the Skiff Creek connector together, to be able to alleviate the traffic on Pocahontas Trail and move it across. So I think there is a long-term solution to this, and in the next year or 2 years, while this thing plays out, as the applicant indicated, we're going to see that peak hour fall from 500 to 150 trips, much less that's in there today. So I would at least hope that we recommend to the board for future development of this land and the area that's going to be here, that we look at that connection into the Greenmount piece. But I intend to support this. I think it's just a shame that he's caught in this VDOT catch-22 of no making of his own, and it's a good business that supports the community. So I intend to support it.
Thank you, Mr. Polster. Rogers, do you have anything?
So there was a question I should have asked while staff was up here, I guess,
You can still ask.
if they would have known the answer to this. But so we have this continuing use that's gone on. I thought it had started in 2005, but it seems like it started in 2010, a long period. So if the SUP is not approved, if the board were to recommend denial and then the Board of Supervisors denied it, do all their operations cease other than the borrow pit?
Correct. He would have to stop the resource recovery and the aggregate storage. All the piles would have to be removed, but they could still operate the borrow pit.
So then, I guess what seemed to be kind of dawning on me as Mr. Lipscomb spoke was his idea if the borrow pit itself is going to go extinct in 2 years or a year or so, something needs to happen with that land, and it seems like there's a continuing use right now that I'm assuming pays taxes to the county and creates industry that is needed in parts of the county. So it struck me in the staff report how many paragraphs began with is compatible with the comprehensive plan, is compatible with the adjacent properties, is compatible with, and then we'd hit the traffic, which would say unmitigated. So I think I'm dogpiling at this point, but to me it seems pretty easy to throw support behind the proposed SUP.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. So I don't have much to add other than sort of the chicken or the egg. We made this the industrial use, and so I think it's, whether it's the state or the county, it's sort of incumbent on us to make sure that the support is in place to support those uses and the like. So I appreciate where staff came from and what the recommendation is, but I think understanding where we are and what the future of this parcel is, it's sort of and considering the use that's been there, it doesn't seem to me that we're really changing a whole lot of the use, and it's certainly in compliance with the comp plan and the use is there. So I think I'll support this as well.
So, Mr. Chair, may I
Sorry,
put
Frank,
forward that we approve?
did you have something
Please,
else?
go ahead.
That we
Okay.
approve special use permit 22-0007 Branscome Resource Recovery and Aggregate Storage.
With the conditions?
With the condition, one condition.
Okay. Mr. Holt?
Mr. Haldeman,
Aye.
Mr. Polster,
Aye.
Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Rogers,
Aye.
and Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Next public hearing this evening, SUP-22-0010, 9201 and 9225 Pocahontas Trail, the Grease Outlet. Good evening, Ms. Yates. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Mr. Chip Haskell and Mr. Boyd Andrews with Grease Outlet for Virginia LLC have applied for a special use permit requesting to allow the use of the property for a grease waste collection, treatment, and transfer station. The subject properties are located at 9201 and 9225 Pocahontas Trail, zoned M2 General Industrial, classified as General Industry on the 2045 Comprehensive Plan, and located inside the primary service area. The facility would include an industrial dome structure with retractable front and rear doors, 4 storage receiving tanks, processing equipment, and an office building. Grease haulers bring waste from food service entities like fast food chains and restaurants to the facility. where it is initially screened to separate trash from the grease. After screening, this trash is then diverted to a landfill. The remaining grease waste is then separated into solid byproduct and liquid. The liquid is pre-treated and routed into the sanitary sewer collection system that connects to the Hampton Roads Sanitation District Treatment Plant. The leftover solid waste byproduct is transferred to third-party disposal facility, primarily composters. With the exception of traffic impacts to Blow Flats Road, staff finds the proposed conditions will mitigate impacts to surrounding properties and development. Staff finds that this proposal is compatible with the surrounding zoning and development and is generally consistent with the 2045 Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Ordinance. If approved, the facility would be accessed by a narrow substandard local road. Furthermore, the intersection of Blow Flats Road and Pocahontas Trail does not meet current VDOT standards. Staff finds the roadway may not be suitable for the increase in industrial trucks associated with this proposed special use permit. As such, staff recommends the Planning Commission recommend denial of this application to the Board of Supervisors. Should the Planning Commission recommend approval of this case, staff has included proposed conditions to mitigate a portion of the potential impacts of this development. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time, and the applicant is also available to you as well.
Thank you. Any questions? I think we're good for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I will open up the public hearing, and the first speaker card I have is Mr. Boyd Andrews.
Evening, and thank you for having me here this evening. I'm pleased to present the first time, unlike Mr. Linscomb, who's a veteran here. My partner Chip Haskell and I are the owners of GreaseOutlet. We established the company about 7 years ago and opened our first facility in Raleigh, North Carolina. We would have hoped to have expanded earlier geographically, but COVID and some of the chaos that has happened around the world has slowed us. But we are very, very interested in coming in investing in James City County. Okay. As described by Susie from the Planning Department, we do our business is really to manage the proper processing and disposal of grease trap waste. If you're not familiar, we're going to walk through exactly the sources of grease trap waste and how it flows today and how we're proposing for it to flow. Our project will bring 5 new jobs. These will not be minimum paying jobs. Our current facility has all certified wastewater treatment plant operators. These are jobs that are at least at 150% of the minimum wage for the area. We also, as part of the conditions put forth, plan to make enhancements to Blow Flats Road. And of course, this is a raw piece of land that we're developing, and so it will be an increase in the county tax base. I think importantly, it'll enhance the reliability of the local waste management systems. It's a bit of probably out of sight, out of mind for many of you now, but all of your restaurants, hospitals, schools have kitchens and they have grease traps, and they pay money every month to have those maintained and for that material to be disposed of. And we believe that we can bring greater reliability and more cost-effective service to those small businesses. So what is a grease trap? So as I described, every university, William and Mary, barbecue joint, fast food joint, your high-end restaurants, everybody has a grease trap. And the sink, the dishwasher, and the floor drain in these food service establishments all flow into this plumbing device. And the plumbing device essentially captures materials that are not desirable to have in the sewer system because they cause clogs and sewer system overflows. Okay? Every 30, 60, or 90 days, a technician with a vacuum truck will come out and vacuum out the entirety of the grease trap. And you can see the image down below. It's fairly representative. Usually there's about 5% of floating grease on the top, and there's about 5% of food solids on the bottom, and then there's a bunch of dirty dishwater in the middle. So those trucks vacuum out the entirety of the contents of that, and then they bring it to a licensed facility who is able to manage the processing and disposal of that. We don't operate any trucks. Our customers operate trucks. Our customers include small plumbing companies as well as companies that are focused on the food service industry in maintaining these traps. The trucks that you see up here on my left on the screen, the vacuum trucks, we attach our hose to this equipment, and the waste materials then come out of the trucks. It flows through a meters where we measure the volume of material that we received and into our tanks. Okay, at that point, we have possession of the materials and it's our responsibility. Our customers then go down the road to service additional restaurants. We do, as Susie accurately described, we screen away the trash. This is less than 1% of the material received, but it can include anything from the nitrile gloves that people use in food service to souffle cups to mop strings. We then take basically the organic fractions. We adjust the pH, we add polymer, and that allows us to discharge pre-treated water to the HRSD. And then you can see here on the far right, we send loads of what is basically organic food matter to composters. And so that then becomes valuable compost that's used in the agricultural industry. Oh, sorry. I feel like we've been talking about Blowflats Road a lot tonight, and we are on Blowflats Road. We are just to the west of Walmart and of Greenmount Parkway. We selected the site because it was zoned industrial, and it has excellent access to Pocahontas and then prospective access via the connector. We do not receive an enormous number of deliveries a day. We have provided the estimated deliveries based upon the number of trucks which are currently delivering to HRSD. HRSD's records indicate that they receive about 100,000 gallons of grease trap per week, and the typical truck size is about 5,000 gallons. And so if you kind of do that math out, it certainly matches up with the numbers which we have presented here. And I think importantly is when you think about the average number of trucks that we bring to the road, it's a much smaller number than the current number of trucks that are on the road there. So here's our site plan, and I think planning staff did a great job in working with us, and our engineer who's here in helping us adapt the initial proposal to something that does conform with all of the planning's guidelines. And I think the statement that came out of the report is, with the exception of traffic impacts to Blowflats Road, staff finds the proposed conditions will mitigate impacts to surrounding properties and development. I think you'll see that there's a significant amount of buffer that we intend to leave there, both to the west, the south, and to the east. We are a little bit closer to the north boundary, but the north boundary has kind of a stranded VDOT right away that may or may not ever be used. We're actually have reached out to them about potentially acquiring that. And then there's a small another triangle over there. All of the land surrounding, directly surrounding us is zoned M2. So here it was able to take some information from the Branscome SUP application that we just heard, and consistent with the discussions which you all just had, the filings with the commission show that the Branscome traffic on the road is decreasing, and it is decreasing 35 to 50%. And those numbers dwarf the number of incremental trucks that we would burden on the road. So and additionally, I think we're just about 0.1 miles in on the road. We're really up close to the connection with Pocahontas. Additionally, what I would say is these trucks is not a new business in the area. All of these trucks are traveling Pocahontas, and they're traveling over to HRSD today. And so these trucks are traveling on Ron Springs Road, which is not a modernized road either. And so it's kind of pick your choice of which, sort of not modernized roads that you would like these trucks to travel. I think in summary, the staff did a great job of speaking to regulators, customers, and folks that have inspected our facility in Raleigh. I'm here to tell you that we are very serious. We are long-term owners, operators. We have never had an injury. We have never had anything other than clean inspection reports. And our general manager, who's here tonight as well, we operate the cleanest facility in the state of North Carolina, and the regulators have said that. We have never had an owner complaint, and our customers come to us because of our reliability. We do see a significant opportunity here and benefits for James City County and our customers in James City County. As I said, we really, our service is servicing restaurants. We do believe that we can lower the cost that the restaurants pay for servicing their grease traps by providing more efficient and just lower cost tipping fees. Finally, and I think while Blow Flats Road hasn't been modernized, it has been proven sufficient to handle significantly more traffic than is projected in 2023. And we have the opportunity, because we do own land that fronts Blow Flats and it is on the curve. We will make significant investments to add 4 feet of pavement to the edge of the section of Blow Flats Road most impacted by our proposal. So with that, I would appreciate if you all have any questions or thoughts that you would like to share or ask me. I'm prepared to answer.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Bolster?
If you could go back to slide 7. And I wanted to talk about the 4-foot paving. Is it only on the side of your property, is there on both sides? And does it extend from both red lines that front there? Is that the extent of it?
So it's my understanding that in terms of conditions, that conditions can be articulated in terms of how property which we would control or own would be utilized. And so the red line, it would be between the two red lines and on our side of the road. In that sort of outside of the curve, from what we can understand with the introduction of our driveway, it would be preferred if that was a little bit wider in there, and that is why the 4 feet would be added on the outside of that curve.
Well, I will make the comment that I do like the way you've got your entry and exit, especially on the exit here, because you can see down Blow Flats, plus you can see any incoming there. And I think that's a nice design feature that you have there.
I won't take any credit. That was the engineers that did that, but thank you. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Andrews?
I just have a question. Do you have clients in our area, and you're hauling all that stuff to Raleigh?
Oh, no. No. So our clients have businesses across the United States. And so what has happened in the last 10 or 15 years is that some folks have acquired a number of smaller companies. And so our client has, names, and they're here on the list, Valley Proteins and Liquid Environmental Solutions. And so they have business in Raleigh and treat traps in Raleigh and bring the materials there. But then they also have traps here in Williamsburg and Norfolk and in Virginia area that they service. And they're the ones who have expressed the desire for us to be in Virginia. And so you're not moving waste materials that far.
And it lowers the cost to the consumer here.
Right.
Or the business people. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Appreciate it. The next speaker card on this is Tom Waltz.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members, and Mr. Holt. Nice to see you.
Finally, yeah.
He helped me with a project last week here in the county. I didn't get a chance to meet him, so thank you for that. And staff. No one ever recognizes staff. Let me just say, good evening, staff. I represent the ownership of this property who could not be here tonight, and they asked me to read a letter to you all if I could on their behalf. And the folks who own this property are Bill Walsh and his brother Pat, who are Walsh Electric. Contractor's been around for a long, long time. My name is Bill Walsh, and I'm treasurer of Walsh Electric. Together with my brother Pat, we own the above referenced land off Blows Flat Road that GreaseOutlet is proposing to develop. We are supportive of GreaseOutlet's SUP application and believe the potential impact of Blows Flats Road will be very limited. In fact, we can't imagine any other prospective buyer having such a limited impact on Blows Flats Road. As background, back in 2007, 2008, we purchased the land and planned to move our business there. But with the downturn in the real estate market, we shelved the project and stayed in Yorktown. Eventually, we decided to put the land up for sale. Surprised they haven't fired me yet, to be honest with you. It's been on the market a while. GreaseOutlet has contracted to purchase our land and proposes to construct a facility to process waste materials collected from restaurants, hotels, and other commercial facilities around the Hampton Roads area. It's our understanding that the planning staff finds that GreaseOutlet's SUP proposal acceptable, except for the fact that Blows Flats Road has not yet been modernized to serve all of the businesses in the area. As the planning commission discusses GreaseOutlet's SUP application and the adequacy of Blows Flats Road, we'd like you to know that we are committed to selling the 7.5 acres of land that we own on Blows Flats. It is our belief that GreaseOutlet's proposed use likely represents the best alternative for use of the subject parcels because they have such a limited industrial amount of truck traffic. On average, 5 per day is what we understand. 5 additional trucks per day on, on Blows Flats seems like a very low and reasonable number. It seems a lot better than 25 to 45 trips that another industrial buyer may generate that may not need a use permit. To the extent that there are concerns about the adequacy of Blows Flats Road, it seems that Planning Commission should support GreaseOutlet's SUP application because GreaseOutlet's business will create significantly less traffic on Blows Flats Road than nearly any other type of prospective business that would purchase the 7.5 acre industrial property. We would very much appreciate your consideration for supporting GreaseOutlet's SUP application. And if we can provide you with any additional information, please call and let us know. We'll be happy to do so. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Waltz.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Holt, for helping me with that matter.
Anybody else that wishes to speak on this application? Seeing and hearing none, I will close the public hearing and turn it over for discussion.
I found myself wishing that this application had come first with the enhancement to Blows Flats Road. It might have been my decision on the first application a little easier, but I don't have any questions.
Others?
To speak, I think it addresses the one issue we all repeated in that first application, which is the Branscome property is already going to reduce traffic, and this isn't going to add much. So we got a road problem no matter what. It seems to kind of, it seems to be the better of the alternative, which would be wait for somebody else and hope they have less than 5 trucks a day.
Correct. I was almost hopeful that there would be access straight onto Pocahontas Trail through that northern piece, but at the end of the day, I personally think that just adding another turning movement on Pocahontas Trail is probably not a wise choice when you have that right there. So I don't see anything terrible about it. So given just the small order of magnitude is the truck traffic. So. Ms. Bolster?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission approve SUP 22-0010, 9201, and 9225 Pocahontas Trail with conditions.
Mr. Holt?
Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Our last public hearing this evening is SUP-22-0015, 7294, 7296 Richmond Road, Pivot Energy Solar Project. As you know, the applicant has asked for deferral. We have opened the public hearing, and Mr. Holt advises me that I would need a roll call to defer it until our November meeting. So,
Let me, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to pull up a date here because we have to postpone it to a date certain. And I thought I had that date memorized. Let me
It's on here.
find out the date of that meeting. Should be November 2nd. Does that
I
sound
think it
right,
is the
Beth?
second.
Okay. So for tonight, the motion would be to postpone consideration of this item and to keep the public hearing open until your November 2nd Planning Commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so, Mr. Holt, we have a motion.
I'll do a quick roll call. Thank you
you.
very much. Mr. Haldeman?
Aye.
Mr. Polster?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
And Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
So we are continued until November 2nd. So, we have no planning commission considerations tonight, and,
Actually, we do.
oh, we do?
We do. Update on our natural and cultural assets plan.
Oh, sorry.
And nope, that's okay. Not used to having stuff in that spot for sure, so
My fault.
no worries
So,
at all.
Sorry, Tammy, wasn't trying to
Exciting
bypass you there.
update for you.
I was trying to let Paul go first because he talks so much, so anyway. So, Ms. Rosario, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Over the past year, James City County, its consultant, Ms. Karen Firehawk of GIC Inc., and the Natural and Cultural Assets Mapping Committee have been developing a natural and cultural assets plan to conserve and protect the county's natural and cultural assets. As shared previously, the natural and cultural assets planning effort has been a multi-stage process of first modeling and mapping the county's natural and cultural assets, then assessing the potential risks to these resources, and very recently identifying opportunities to conserve, protect, or restore them. I would like to recognize the work of the Mapping Committee, a citizen advisory committee who was appointed by the Board of Supervisors in October of 2021. Members provided considerable guidance throughout the process and are represented here tonight by Mr. J. Everson. Also instrumental in the effort was the Technical Advisory Committee, comprised of county staff from various divisions responsible for stewarding the county's natural and cultural resources. Last but not least, I would like to thank the many citizens who gave foundational input during the Engage 2045 Comprehensive Plan, which led into this effort, as well as those who gave suggestions for assets to add, revise, or delete from our maps during our February survey, and the many members of the public who attended our community open house or completed our online survey regarding the recommendations in the plan. All of these elements and contributions have been captured in the draft Natural and Cultural Assets Plan that was included in the packet for your reference. Ms. Karen Firehawk, the county's consultant on the project, is here to make a short presentation on the plan prior to its formal consideration by the Board of Supervisors later this month. At the conclusion of Ms. Firehawk's presentation, we'd both be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. As she said, my name is Karen Firehawk. It's great to be back here. I think it's been about a year. It went by really quickly.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So I will be just doing a few introductory slides just because it has been so long, and just in case there's members of the public who are not at all familiar with this plan. But I'll try to get quickly to the meat of it, which is the actual strategies that we came up with. So I want to talk about, just a reminder quick of where this project came from, the process that we followed, the mapping we did, the community input, and the strategies, and what's next. So just as a quick reminder, and you all as the stewards of the comprehensive plan appreciate this, but this came from the 2035 strategic plan actually mentioned doing this work, and then it was reaffirmed in your 2045 comprehensive plan. So we are really excited to actually move forward with meeting a major comprehensive plan objective. There's a lot of benefits to doing this work. So we talk about these resources as natural assets because you are a local government and you want to steward your resources well. Any kind of asset that you have, whether it's your school buildings or your county office building, your facility here, but also there's a lot of natural assets that you're also charged with stewarding. And so what we did in this project was to evaluate their condition and extent. There's a lot of benefits: preserving biodiversity and wildlife habitat, protecting working land. So we also include agricultural soils that contribute to the economy and of course feed us, which is really important. Protecting and preserving water quality and supply, so recharging our groundwater aquifers. Cost-effective stormwater management and hazard mitigation. A lot of these marshes are buffering us against storms. Trees are soaking up stormwater. And then also, most important perhaps, improving public health, quality of life, and recreation networks. People really enjoy getting outside here in James City County. And also this barred owl very much appreciates your work as well. That's all of my slides are from James City County, including this owl. So we went through a 6-step process, setting goals. Fortunately, we had the recent work of the Engage 2045, and we did mine that extensively. So we used the citizen input you already had. Review data, what do we know or need to know? So we obtained existing data. We also created new data. Then we created maps of both your natural and your cultural assets. We also looked at what was at risk. I sort of call that the so what phase. You know, it's nice to know what you have, but we also need to know if there's places we should pay special attention to. And then determining what are the opportunities, what do we want to do? And now we are moving into implementation. So we're about to wrap up this plan. And we have one more reading with the Board of Supervisors before it would be adopted by the county. So we actually are on schedule. I just called fall the wrap up, so I gave myself a little leeway there. But we will be wrapping this up in October. We've held 5 technical advisory committee meetings and 5 natural and cultural assets mapping committee meetings. That's a mouthful. We did 2 online surveys. The first survey was where people got to drop a digital pin on a map of places that were important to them. But we also, for people who don't want to go online and fuss with that, we also had stations, one at the rec center and one at the library. So people could go by and literally put a pin on the map. And then we also had a second round of public input where people could comment on policies. And so we had an online survey going. We did 2 presentations to the board, and this is our second one to the Planning Commission, and we're hoping to wrap up soon. So what did we evaluate and how did we evaluate it? We used a lot of satellite imagery to classify the land cover, and I'm not going to bore you with the details of that this evening. But we also pulled in other data sets, such as rare, threatened, and endangered species from the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We pulled in floodplain data from FEMA, a lot of different sources of information to put it all together to do the analysis. We also looked at your cultural assets. So a lot of your landscapes are important for protecting these resources. And I must say, one of the comments from our committee members was we could just draw a giant circle around the whole county and call it, all heritage resources. I mean, we only could map things that had already been discovered. I dare say that you will be continuing to put new points, new finds, new data onto that map for the time being. But we really wanted to look at how these landscapes protect these resources, their settings, et cetera. And then on to the mapping. So we looked at the largest, most intact landscapes. We looked at landscapes that were at least 100 acres or more. That's actually a scientifically determined number. It has to do with supporting native bird species in Virginia. So that's sort of the minimum size to have a healthy native bird population of interior forest species. But it'll also protect bears and other species. And I saw there were some bear sightings in the county in the last few years. So we're looking at where those largest intact landscapes are. But then we also are looking at the quality of those landscapes. So as I said, if an area had rare, threatened, and endangered species, we gave that some more points. If it had a lot of water in the area, we gave it more points because it provided more different types of habitats, or if it had a lot of streams. So there's a lot of different information that went into ranking this. So it's all in a model that we've already provided to your GIS staff. So all the data that we created, and collected, and collated has now been transferred to the county. So we also needed to update it. So we looked at any large developments that were either recent or were coming up in the next 6 months, and we just manually removed some of those areas. And for a few places where it was questionable, like this was developed, but they had some open space, did they really disturb a lot of the area? So we actually did field visits to take a look at those landscapes and see how they were doing. And then we're also looking at corridors, how they are connected, because the more species can move across the landscape, the better. And also people like to move across the landscape. So we looked at those corridors as well. So this map, the sort of brightest green, that sort of neon green, those are the habitat cores that have super special value. They also protect a lot of heritage resources or rare species. And then the sort of lighter greens are also important. And then these sort of little fork-looking things, these are important corridors. You'll notice that there is corridors within the growth area, but you can still keep some of those corridors connected even as you grow. So we'll talk about that. We looked at agricultural soils. So these are soils that are the highest ranked for crops, so for growing food. The county actually has quite a rich array of agricultural soil, but you're not seeing as much here because we didn't include it if it was already in the forest. We figure we're not doing colonial stump agriculture anymore. We're not going to be taking out a forest to put in a farm, too much work. So there are more soils than we're showing, but we're showing soils that are in open land and also ag forestal districts, so we can get a sense of, are all of our high value soils protected in an ag forestal district or not? Then looking at forestry, this showing tracts that are large enough for a continued silvicultural management, not one cut and done, but you could continue that forestry operation over time. Forestry is a really important part of your economy, so we just looked at those areas that were forested and large enough. Doesn't mean they should be timbered, just that they might be able to be. And then water. This is in some ways the most complicated and also the most simple map because the floodplains are where they are. I know FEMA is always adjusting things, but we're looking at areas that might flood. We're also looking at, in orange, you'll see those are your 500-year floodplains. The county wants us to put those big storm potential flood areas on as well. These rivers also serve as connectors for wildlife. So really important that you are such a water-rich community. And then recreation. So there's lots and lots of trails. We just did a little inset of Freedom Park. I mean, you can just see there's just nothing but trails in there, just about. But we're looking at how these habitat areas also support recreation, whether it's, a beautiful view if you're bird watching or if you're running through the park as this woman is doing. So we looked at how the landscape also supports recreation. There's a lot of recreation too, like hunting, that goes on private lands, but it still requires a connected landscape. The better connected the landscape, the more healthy the resource. And then heritage and culture. This one took the most work, and I feel like in the last week, maybe somebody discovered some more things we should put on. But we finally had to just call a stop. And so the county can continue to add new sites. But this really shows the rich array of all different types of historic sites, but also we added sites that the community told us about. So you could have a building that hasn't been nominated as a National Register property, but it actually is old and historic and worthy of that. So we put on the places that the community said were important to them. And it could also include a scenic view. It could include a place people really like to go birding or something. So it's all those different spots and places. And then we looked at risks, and I'm not going to go into this in great detail this evening, but we looked at sea level rise. So we looked out to the year 2060. We didn't want to go to 2100. That's really far in the future. So we just wanted to look at, in our near term, in our lifetime, what might be impacted by sea level rise. Then we looked at storm surge. A lot of the same areas pop up, not quite as extensive, but areas that are repeatedly inundated that can actually harm the forest and create conditions like ghost forests. Trees just get hit so much, they weaken, and then they're susceptible to pine beetles and other things. So those areas under surge can be at higher risk. We looked at impaired rivers. Those are impaired as according to DEQ, as you guys probably understand. So we didn't have any say on whether they're impaired or not. We just used the state's database to just note that. We looked at development risk. And of course, you want to grow within your growth area, and you've got a great outline for where you intend growth to occur, but there's still habitat cores that are at risk but could be preserved in a development schema. And then utility scale solar. We used, the Department of Energy contracted with a series of different models that show the best places for solar based on the fact that they're near transmission lines. So they provided that to the solar industry. We sort of flipped that on its head and said, because they're been shown to be good for solar, they might also be at high risk for solar. We're not against solar energy at all. We need solar energy perhaps, but what we're concerned with is large scale clearing of forests. We're concerned with large impacts to the landscape, so all counties in Virginia are now struggling with how to come up with guidance for where they want solar, as well as any requirements they want to put in place to make sure it's less impactful. And then we put that all together and we have sort of the cumulative risk map, adding all these risks together. Those that have permanent impacts got a few more weight. So that's sort of the redder it is or the oranger, the higher that risk level. And then there's a lot of fun statistics. I'm not going to read off all these numbers to you. I'm sure it's been a long day for y'all already. But I'll just cut to the chase and just note that we looked at your habitat cores in the county, and you have 44,000 acres of really high quality habitat cores. That's amazing and wonderful. And I hope that when perhaps I come back in 10 years, we can say you still got that. But we also ask questions like, how many of these habitat cores are supporting a cultural or recreational resource that's been identified, and it's 59 of 60. So, and then I asked our, our GIS analysts to run the numbers for me on how many support a rare, threatened, or endangered species. All of them do. So they're doing a good job in terms of protecting critters that are at risk. All right, so I talked about the community input already, and we also thanked our committee members, but we did an extensive online engagement process. We got a lot of really good comments, and we used this information to bring back to our committee and then ask them, are there new goals or actions that we should adopt? Got a lot of comments from folks on what they thought was important, so they had the option to vote on the strategies to say whether they supported them or didn't. The support rate was about 96%. So pretty much people liked what we had come up with, and they made a number of interesting comments, such as increased funding to grow farms and agritourism in the county, continue to add buffers and corridors to link developments and provide habitat for animals, provide buffers between roads and developments, provide more trails and bike lanes. So a lot of the things that you would expect. So what do we do with this? You guys are the Planning Commission. So that's the most important thing for you. There's a lot of planning applications for this work, whether you're doing transportation planning, looking at your 6-year road plans, whether you might shift a road a little bit to accommodate something. Comprehensive plans and zoning, so as you update your next comp plan, some of these maps will probably go in there. Where people might put conservation easements, open space and park planning, such as your green waste plan, that needs to be updated. Looking at purchase of development rights, you've had done that in the past. Heritage tourism and view sheds, the more we can keep tourists staying even longer in the county, not just go to Jamestown and scoot, but to stay here and visit all the pick your own and pet your own farms, etc. Ag forestal districts and land management. So here's an application example. If you had 2 habitat cores, these big green blobs, let's say you had a development parcel, and then here's a good development, maybe with a central green. The creek was in the way, so they hypothetically piped it, which you actually can get a permit from the Corps to pipe even a buffered stream. And maybe they have stuck a little pocket park in the corner. So we thought, well, could we fit the same amount of development in that scenario and actually leave the stream alone? So here we've restored the stream buffer and planted trees along it. We've squeezed the houses down into some slightly smaller lots. We've got a sports field in the middle, but we end up with an abundance of walking trails and parkland around the development. And these type of developments sell faster and for a better profit margin. They cost less for the developer to develop than traditional designs. And we have actually participated in a number of these, helping developers reimagine a site. In fact, someone actually already came to Mr. Rosario and asked for help on where should they put their open space on their lot using the maps that we created. So So I'm just going to race through these at lightning speed. I hope I don't give you a migraine, but I'm going to just try to walk through them. And in the plan that you have, the sort of paper version of it, or the PDF, it actually has also recommended actions for how all these strategies could be achieved. But I didn't put that all up on the screen in the interest of some brevity. All right, so the first goal is to conserve and protect the highest value natural habitat cores and connecting corridors to support wildlife, trails and greenways, scenic vistas, and cultural and recreational values. That's a lot. And this one has the most objectives. So update the Greenway plan to include the key corridors so we can use the Greenway plan to pull in some of these corridors for recreation. Conduct an education campaign for landowners, homeowners, and neighborhood associations. A lot of the public said, we're in, we support it, what can I do on my land? So creating perhaps some pages on your website with things that homeowners and HOAs can do. Provide and publish design guidance for developers. So we have had a lot of good luck working with developers when we show them a different schema. Add conservation cores and corridors as additional criteria for county purchase of development rights. So in other words, in your PDR program, you might add some points if a property had 30% of a habitat core was also on the property. So there's some simple ways that you can do the math. We created that for Albemarle County. Use natural and cultural asset maps and their value and risk rankings to inform your green space program, park acquisitions, or other plans. So just in general, look to these maps if you're going to be looking to acquire any future parkland. Use the assets risk map to identify areas where public park infrastructure may be flooded and may need expansion. So if you have a parking lot that might be at risk or a boat ramp that might need to be relocated, you can use these risk maps for that. And then work with the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation, Preservation Virginia, and the National Park Service at Jamestown, the 1607 Fort, and town archaeological sites on work to protect Jamestown Island. We've talked with them a lot. There's a lot of concern with archaeological resources becoming inundated over time, and then also species needing to move to higher ground. So that's just a sort of reminder that there's a high interest in continuing to partner with the county on trying to protect this resource. And then looking at your land management master plans for opportunities to improve habitat health and diversity for water quality. So just looking at the designs as you do your master plan, pulling in this data for various areas. Develop zoning tools and guidance for siting large-scale solar sites. As I mentioned, multiple counties across our Commonwealth are struggling with this right now. We don't have adequate guidance to say what it is we want. And then encouraging landowners to keep their land in forest cover. It's the most protective land cover. It helps to recharge groundwater. And then encouraging land preservation groups to seek easements for properties that have these assets. So that would be a sort of a private sector activity, but we've had great luck working with Land Trust, having them use these maps. Then working with developers. So there'll be some back and forth and dialogue. So as you know about larger sites that are coming forward, county staff might work with a developer to say, hey, we have a new tool we'd like you to take a look at. Informing your long-range transportation plans for road siting and design. And just as a quick side note, we've also had good luck with VDOT, actually, when they're looking for mitigation sites for roads that they are building, to say, well, we have some sites we'd like you to do some planting and restoration on. And so having a map and strategy is helpful for that. Continuing stewardship of all of the irreplaceable prehistoric and historic sites, landscapes on governor's land. So governor's land archaeological district, and you'll see that in the plan is highlighted. And then support conservation and protection priorities of the Lower Chickahominy watershed through membership in the Watershed Collaborative. If you're already participating in that, that one is really just let's keep going. All right. And then goal 2, conserve and protect high-value ag soils and historic farms to support the agricultural economy and continue our agrarian heritage. So just using the high-value ag maps that we provided for you. And also consider not disturbing those highest quality soils for solar sites. Even when they construct them, you think of panels just sitting on the top, but they have to do a lot of land grading and moving of soil to put those in. And so it's just like any construction site. And you have to consider whether great soil is the place where you want those to go. And then facilitate continued agriculture by promoting Farm Link. And you may not be familiar with that. I kind of call it like dating for farmers. Not, not like what I'm making it sound like. This is where younger farmers who want to get into farming and older farmers whose kids don't want to farm, it's a program that gets them together so we could enroll some more farms in James City County in that program. Promoting expansion of existing ag and forestal districts. So I mentioned that already. Creating a tourism route. So you do have a number of sites where you can pick things or pet animals, but those sites are hard to find. They're not on a coherent map or an app that people can find. And we'd like to find ways to, like I said, keep more people in the county longer, but also for farmers, it helps them stay in business if they can find other ways to have tourists, come pick pumpkins or go in a corn maze or those kind of things. And then host a workshop on agritourism. This one generated a lot of excitement by the public in a positive way. And we already had some members of the public offering, I'll host this workshop, I'll help raise funds, I'd like to get going. So there's a lot of interest because it does take some work to turn your farm into an ag tourism site. And it takes careful consideration, traffic, and all those other concerns. And then also thinking about AFD renewals, whether those terms might be lengthened. If that's just something counties looked at in the past, exploring that again. All right, the next one is facilitate voluntary planting projects to extend the width of vegetative buffers to serve as wildlife corridors along the county's waterways and protect water quality. The state of Virginia, a little fact, they need to plant about 44 million trees in the next 3 years to meet our Chesapeake Bay goals. Spoiler alert, we will not meet this. We will not make it. The governor's already acknowledged that. It's just a lot of work. We're a little behind, but there's abundant funding for planting buffers and abundant workforce to do it. So if that's something of interest, there definitely is money and work there to go around. All right, so educating landowners, homeowners, and neighborhood associations on the importance of these buffers. Partnering with the Virginia Department of Forestry to help them get their job done. Seeking an increase in the county's community rating system points. So it's possible, we did this with the city of Norfolk, we did a similar plan for them, but obviously an urban plan, and we're able to actually knock some, I always get it backwards if it's like adding points or losing points, but anyway, to reduce your flood insurance risk. You already have a really good rating, but you could actually even have a better one. So that's something to look into. And then prevent stormwater impacts from utility scale solar. All counties are working on these standards because DEQ has ordered all counties to do that. But we just want to put a little emphasis on that. All right, and the last one really gets more into the built environment, looking at promoting biodiverse landscapes. So the first one is updating your code for street trees and new developments to specify biodiverse street tree plantings of at least 5 different species to be varied at the block level. So not on each lot, but over an entire block, there would be 5 different kinds of trees. The reason for that is when disease comes in, like the emerald ash borer, and kills all the ash trees, if you only have one kind of tree, then you're gonna not be in good shape. So trying to make sure you've got a diversity. Then looking at your tree and shrub list itself to make sure it has the right species by the right location. To give you a quick example, red maple is often proposed as a tree for parking lots because it's pretty and showy, in the fall it's red. However, it's a terrible tree for parking lots in general because it gets heat stressed and its bark cracks and it just does bad and the top dies. So just telling developers, no, never put a red maple in the parking lot. So just updating that list, it wouldn't take a lot of work and then you would have the right standards. And then looking at promoting the use of native plants in planting projects. And this is an example of how the public's input was used. A lot of interest in by people for biodiversity. All right, so next steps. If you have comments on the plan, I'd love to hear them. Any changes will be made. So the plan that you have could still be tweaked a little bit. Basically, we've tweaked it and tweaked it and tweaked it. I think we had 17 rounds of edits on this. I'm not kidding. But this is not the final version. The final version will be beautifully typeset. This is just a working copy. I said that, all right. And then following the adoption, we'll publish and publicize this to build on the various strategies into budgets and work plans. So there's a lot of different activities and they're coded by long-term, medium-term, and short-term. So that will need to be built into the staff's work plan. They'll have to think about when are they doing these things. And then we've also recommended grant sources that could be applied for. There's actually a tremendous amount of funding available out there for transportation plans. For the Inflation Reduction Act has a lot of money. The Land and Water Conservation Fund has more money than it's ever had for parkland acquisition. So I think the next 5 years is really the time to start to go after some of these larger grants. And then long-term, of course, update the maps, determine progress in how you've done with the strategy. You have, a snapshot in time of how you're doing, but to look in 5 years and see, how did you do? Where are you? What have you achieved? And then, of course, continue to enjoy the natural and cultural assets of the county. So get outside and recreate. All right, so that is all I have for this evening. I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Yes, sir.
Posted on the web, or is posted on the website, right?
This plan, is this version posted? Okay.
I know,
It's in
but
your- yeah.
I don't know if it was on the.
It's in the packet that's posted on the agenda portion of the website, but it's not yet posted on the Natural and Cultural Assets webpage.
That was my question.
Thank you.
Yes, we were, while I was sitting in the next room while we were having hearings, I was actually inserting photos into the final graphic layout. So that will be coming shortly, but this is not yet online. Other questions?
See, just curiosity.
Yes.
Do you see in developments where you gave us the example of piping the stream or reorganizing, do you see in other localities, if they go to protect these core areas, do they allow a higher density? So, just in terms of like clustering and those types of things, or?
Yeah, so I see two different things, probably more than two, but I'll just stick with two. One option is, allowing another story on a building, so going higher instead of wider. That becomes an incentive, and for the developer, it actually is less costly for them to add a story than to make a bigger footprint. The other option I've seen is putting the houses on smaller lots. And then you still have the same amount of land that's in the county's tax base, but now the community has a park that's kind of baked into their development. So it also reduces the burden on the county to have to provide continual new parks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Firehawk?
Just a small one, and I'm
Sure.
not sure if, well, maybe you know how to answer this or not, but I thought that when you did the smaller lots with bigger HOA common areas, like the parks, the HOA property, I don't believe is taxed. The smaller home lots are, right? So it would seem to me the tax base, I'm not opposed, but that your tax base would shrink because.
It really shouldn't, because it's still the same amount of land. I've seen in some developments, not here, but where they donate that land that's open space to a land trust or something, and it goes out of the tax rolls. It becomes a park, but it's not part of the actual property, then it changes status. But it should still, one of the things, I guess another way to answer it is, what happens is the individual house prices themselves tend to be higher because they're actually bordering a park. And so when you do the number crunching, so you've got, smaller lots, so each person has less property that you're taxing, but actually their houses are more valuable because they're bordering a park. So there's a lot of, I don't have the numbers for you tonight, but I've seen these analyses where you add that all up, and at the end of the day, you still come out ahead financially.
I see the house on the park argument.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that our HOA does not pay tax on our common area, at least not at the same rate as the way the county hits your house and your lot.
You don't. In Virginia, it's common areas, and that includes, pools, clubhouses, tennis courts, and open space. They are not taxed, and they are considered to be part of the value of the home. So the home value inside the HOA is typically higher than if it were in a freestanding community. So then it's, so you're getting the same dollar per square foot there, but it's going higher on the property value.
Yeah, we provided some numbers in the report actually about and I updated them for $2022 for how much additional value you get per house if it's close to a park. I can't remember, something like $4,000 to $7,000. Don't quote me on that. I'd have to actually read what I wrote, but yeah. So yeah, it's always a consideration, but it's also, think about the fact that if the developer is providing that a big enough park within that, then your county's not having to provide more parks that you have to build. So it's, you kind of have to look at the whole big picture.
Internal Revenue Service will deduct, if you have two parcels side by side and you put a conservation easement on one of them and claim that as a tax deduction, they'll grant that tax deduction, but subtract from it an increase in the value of your adjacent property. I don't know how they do it. I don't know what the formula is, but they recognize the fact that open space does increase the value of neighboring properties.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there are some interesting tools that we have in Virginia that some places don't, such as tax credits. So if you want to put a conservation easement on your property, but let's say that you don't owe a lot of taxes because you're not a wealthy landowner, you can actually sell those credits on the open market and get paid for that. So that's a neat thing we have in Virginia that other states don't, where it still makes sense for conservation easements even for people who are not wealthy enough to owe a lot of tax. So it lets that sort of middle class folks come in and take advantage of that.
You had a slide, that showed all the different impacts, it had the pluses in between and
sure.
ended with the cumulative impacts. And so it appeared that the northwest side of, or I guess not, the western side of the county that abuts the James River seems to be the one that's most susceptible to sea level rise and storm surge. And is that because it's lower level, or it is a long-term strategy to go in and, armor those slopes, or what's, will we take that into consideration as part of a recommendation long-term? And I guess that's probably more for Tammy than you, but,
Yeah, and I'm happy to let Tammy come up and answer that. But I will say that one of the challenges we looked at, you have here in James City County, as we do on a lot of the Hampton Roads area, is that we have a landscape that's also subsiding. So we have a sinking problem. And some of that has to do with past groundwater withdrawals. In the more urban areas, it also has to do with the fact that the sediment has been starved. It used to just flow out in a plume and deposit, and now we built on top of those areas. So we've got the sinking that in the other place in the country is Louisiana. That's also sinking. So unfortunately, this area has got that sort of double whammy. But in terms of strategies, in some cases, the best strategy is to simply pull back, to move the parking lot or move that infrastructure back. You can armor against storm surge, but only to a certain point, because what we've seen in a number of, we did a big report on resiliency for coastal forests. And some of the places where people have put those berms out in the water, far from, so it'll break that wave action, that storm surge, they're sinking now below the water line. And so it's not holding up. So it's a pretty expensive way to do it. I would only employ that type of strategy if it was something really important, some piece of infrastructure I really, really needed to protect. So Tammy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Okay.
I will say, though, that when you look at her risk map, is when we did the comprehensive plan, we used the Hampton Roads sea level of 1.5 foot. For this one, for 2060, they used 3 foot. So without regard to the subsidence, it's the level of the land, especially in the Gordon Creek area for it. So what's going to happen is we're going to lose a tax base of any of that land because it's going to revert to the state because of the Virginia but the most important thing is you're going to see a migration into all of the RFP areas that go upstream. So one of the things she's done in her maps is she's sort of indicated where that is going to occur. So what you're essentially going to see, especially in the, I'll just use it as an example for the Jamestown Marina, is the RPA is going to expand beyond what it currently is.
Yep.
And that land will not be developed. So paying attention to that piece along with the storm surge, but just even with the sea level rise, it's all going to be impacted. So we have big areas of this county where you need to do something about bridges, like across Jamestown Road with the Powhatan and the flooding. And those are the issues that they're really bringing out here. And I will say this, that when you look at those habitat scores and you look at the risk, when you look at those specific 60 pieces that she's talked about, she's actually got it broken down where you have a score associated with it, so that you can see the level of severity, either multiple or whatever. And it's really a great piece of work in terms of the risk assessment to specific parcels.
Yeah, so you can, these are looking like big blobs up here, but yeah, you can pull up the data by parcel. You could look at it by zoning. You could look at what types of zoning will be impacted. But you have a window of time to plan. So it's just something to keep in mind as you go forward.
So the last pitch is Chickahominy Haven is going to be underwater, and unless you raise the houses and extend the 2-foot freeboard to something higher, you're going to have the same thing that happened down in Florida.
One of the challenges, though, I'll also point out when we look at adapting buildings, like by raising them, if you have a situation where it's not storm surge, but it's actually sea level rise, if the sea has come in, the river water, you can't really live there at that point because you don't have your sewage pipes, you don't have your storm pipes, they're full of water. So, it just becomes untenable. It becomes untenable once it's permanent. Storm surge is one thing, so you kind of have to separate storm surge from permanent inundation. And then there's also just what happens to neighborhoods, where if you have houses that are getting wet often enough. I saw this in Norfolk. We did a lot of work there. People raised their houses, but then their cars were destroyed. Their yards were ruined. So it just kind of just destabilizes the whole neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. I didn't want to end on a depressing note. Let's go back to how many great habitats you have here and what a gorgeous landscape. Anyway. It's all data. It's all for planning. It's for looking into the future. We've given you a peek into, I think, what is a reasonable planning horizon. So that as you go forward, and like we said, Kim, your GIS analyst, has all this data. So she can run maps for you, and we're going to continue to be available. We're not disappearing. We're continuing to coach her and make sure she understands how to use this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Everson, thanks for being here tonight and participating on the committee. Appreciate it. So we heard you're giving a presentation next. No schools tonight, so, all right, so now I'm getting back on track. I'm going back to, Mr. Holt for the Planning Director's report.
Between the two of us, we'll keep it straight. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Nothing too much additional to add. I will say in there, we've got at least 2 commission members who were either directly involved in or were very actively tracking work that was being done as part of the Workforce Housing Task Force group that met a couple of years ago. You'll see a couple bullet points in the director's report about even more additional funding that we've been able to secure for some of those efforts in the county, and we're going to be moving forward, so we continue to be proud of those accomplishments. But other than that, happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Holt? Off the hook. Planning Commission discussions and requests. I have the duty next week for Board of Supervisors. So,
goody.
I will be working on that this weekend.
here.
So, I have all of our lovely notes from last week or last month for our discussion on 4 land use cases, and one being the 3 to 20 discussion. So it'll be an interesting meeting for sure. So, feel free to attend if you like. So. And on that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our November 2nd meeting.
So moved.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.